All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us today, taking the time out of what I'm sure might have been a busy work day for some of you, or a busy day of no classes for the students that are in the room. If you don't know me, my name is Andrew Clifford, and I'm here on behalf of the School of Translation at Glendon College to introduce our two guests that are with us today for our public panel. And by way of framing the discussions that we're about to have, I might begin by quoting renowned baseball player and coach Yogi Berra when he said that the future ain't what it used to be. And so if that can be said of baseball, surely it can be said of translation. And I'm saying this because I'm thinking notably about the financial crisis that started with us in 2008 and that some would say is still with us. Certainly the economic situation for most countries in the global north has changed drastically and possibly for the worst. And it's understandable, I think, that a lot of institutions within the public sector are feeling a bit of a pinch and are looking very closely at the things that they are doing, trying to rationalize, trying to become more efficient, concentrate on core mandates, and in some cases perhaps even shrink the size of some of their operations. And so for students, I think there might be a tendency to look at this and to maybe grimace just a bit, because some students that are listening to us today or that will listen to this later on when we post it on YouTube may be saying to themselves, well, that represents fewer opportunities for me, especially for those students that are in that mindset that all I have to do is flop down a CV and I can walk into that sort of institutional job. Now, I would argue that has never really been the case, and it arguably is not the case anymore. But some people are tending to look at this with a little bit of a negative stance. At the same time, one of the things that I would suggest, I read recently a U.S. Bureau of Labor statistic that said that the growth in the translation sector in the next 8 years was slated to jump by 42%. And that compares to an average of about 13% for most other professions. So we're seeing changes, some of them positive, some of them negative, and clearly all of us, whether we're students or part of the industry, stakeholders, we need to be able to step back to understand those changes a little bit better, understand what they mean for us in our sector, and then consequently to strategize about them. And so I hope that the conversation we have today will allow us to do all of those things. By way of introduction, I'll begin on my far right with Ms. Donna Achimov, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Translation Bureau at Public Works and Government Services Canada. Ms. Achimov is no stranger to Glendon. She has been with us before for another event, and she was very warmly received, and I hope you will receive her quite warmly this time around. We, of course, have a very, I think, positive working relationship with the Translation Bureau, engaging with them on a number of fronts. A new face perhaps for us today is Mr. Rytis Martikonis, who is the director of the Directorate General for Translation at the European Commission. And while Mr. Martikonis might be a new face, hopefully he'll become a more familiar one, and we'll have other opportunities to reach out and to network with him and with his colleagues at the DGT in Brussels and elsewhere. All right, so that being said, I'm simply going to turn the floor over to our speakers. The first up is Ms. Achimov. You'll be hearing from her for about 15 minutes, and then we'll switch up and hear from Mr. Martikonis.
Thank you very much. Merci. Merci, Andrew. Mesdames, Messieurs, je suis très contente d'être ici. Mon collègue Anne Rutledge, bonjour. I'm glad that you're here today from ALIA, and Denis Bousquet, ancienne présidente de CITIC, qui sont ici, je pense, avec nous aujourd'hui. Oui, bien sûr. Et Rytis, bienvenue au Canada. He braved weather and time zone differences, and it's great to be here. I love coming here. I'm so impressed with, as I mentioned earlier, your facilities, the energy, and always to see students and faculty. And I'm glad that we're here with a good mix of private sector associations and a good cross-section of people. So one of the issues or one of the challenges in the language industry in Canada today, I'm obsessed about numbers and people and ages and la relève et le besoin d'avoir les jeunes et aussi les personnes avec différentes expériences. Plus tôt cette année, le bureau a fait faire une analyse comparative pour mieux comprendre notre environnement. On a engagé PricewaterhouseCoopers de regarder la façon qu'on gère nos affaires et comment est-ce qu'on peut comparer ça avec les autres endroits. And we've got that study online. It's on our language portal, and I do encourage you to take a look at some of that. It's an open, honest look at everything from how we embrace technology to our productivity and some of our trends, so that's key. So the Canadian language services industry, we're always trying to get accurate numbers, but as an employer, we are estimated to employ about 15,000 translators, interpreters, terminologists, and localization specialists, and those were numbers that we had from 2010. The average age of those in the translation is higher than in any other part of our workforce. 22% of translation workforce is aged 55 or older, as compared to about 15% for the entire workforce. I'm seeing every day, I sign these wonderful notes thanking people for 30, 35 years of service, and many are retiring and taking with them incredible, rich expertise. Approximately 1,000 new translators are needed each year to meet the demand in Canada, not just in the government, to replace retirees, and only about 300 graduate. So those are some numbers that we really need to think about. And the industry is comprised mainly of self-employed workers, and most of those are women. At the Bureau, the majority of our translators, 75% are women, and I'm really paying a lot of attention to that because we are looking at home work-life balance, how we recruit, and what types of working conditions do we want to look at. So employee demographics is interesting for us to keep a look at. Andrew was quite candid in terms of government is changing. Most federal departments and agencies, provincial counterparts, municipalities are all looking at being more efficient and doing things differently. And I would say that holds some challenges, but I think it's some opportunities. Ritas and I were talking a little earlier about the fact that we are limiting, for legitimate reasons, travel. And so what we're doing now is we're really pushing the edge of video conferencing. We're using telepresence and virtual meetings. What does that mean in terms of our skills as facilitators, how we leverage our interpretation colleagues, and how we do a better job at preparing? I know regardless of translation interpretation, many of us find it very frustrating not getting material ahead of time. And what we're finding is video conferencing is forcing us to have that kind of discipline. And again, quality, translated, timely information, and some of the challenges of interpreting across distances when you're not physically in the room, I think has some real opportunity for all of us. We are also seeing a trend to smaller government. The Bureau used to be the main recruiter of translators and interpreters, and we're looking to share some of that with the private sector. And I know that I've spoken to Anne and a few other colleagues in industry associations to look at, can we do, est-ce qu'on peut former les jeunes et avoir les stages, peut-être un peu avec pas seulement le Bureau de la traduction, mais peut-être les stages avec les secteurs privés, les associations, et nous sommes une partie clé, mais pas seulement le seul parti. So we have some opportunities, I think, to work collaboratively to look at how we form and how we work with young people. I would say one of the most interesting trends that I'm paying a lot of attention to is obviously the global realities, being globally connected, and technology. We're seeing a growing demand, a domestic demand for translation services across more than English and French, Spanish, Chinese, German, Russian. The recent census was quite interesting, and I think that all of you here, especially students, should take a read through the recent census, the 2011 census. Plus de 200 langues ont été déclarées comme les langues parlées à la maison ou comme langue maternelle. Presque 6,6 millions de personnes, soit à peu près 20% de la population, ont déclaré parler une autre langue que le français ou anglais à la maison. So that's an interesting trend in terms of other languages other than English and French. And I think with that comes tremendous, what we in Canada embrace in terms of multiculturalism. With that comes the need to import, to export, to have trade relations. And I think what we're going to see is different types of demand for translation. Product label. security, shipping. There isn't a single cargo freight container that comes into this country by air, land, or sea that doesn't have a manifest attesting what contents are inside. These contents come from all over the world. It's translation, it's steady work, it's interesting work, and it's vital to keep our economy going. Yet it may not be the type of work perhaps that you were thinking of embarking in, but however, I think because of our global concerns in terms of security as well as expansion of trade, that these are going to be areas we need to look at. We've talked mainly about the benefits of immigration and cross-fertilization. Sometimes there are risks. We've seen pandemics come about, and what the census has now told us is that our typical warning, public advisory notices aren't necessarily going to work in English and French. And the need to have real-time quality language other than English and French to ensure safety in the population, I think, is going to be critical. And again, it's an opportunity and certainly is a different type of work that's coming about. And I think as well that technology is allowing us to look very differently at how we actually do the work that we do as linguistic professionals. I know from my 18 months in the Translation Bureau that there's been mixed reaction in terms of how we use what we're calling our language ecosystem. We've developed an ecosystem which we're hoping to be leading edge and which we're hoping to make available not only to the public service but to Canadians at large. Memory translation, machine translation, that whole ecosystem from start to finish, looking at quality control, looking at how we manage terminology. We've just launched our first BlackBerry and iPhone app where we've taken Termium, which is our incredibly rich language database, and we've made it available certainly online in terms of our language portal, but now it's available free of charge as an iPhone and BlackBerry app. And we're thrilled to be able to do that because that used to be a tool that was only the domain of a few translators in the Bureau, and it became available across the Bureau into the public service, to Canada, and I know to my colleagues around the world and to citizens of the globe. So we have to look at how we manage technology, and I know that that poses some challenges for us. I encourage all of you as you think about your careers, and I encourage you in the private sector as well, to think about how we can leverage technology, not only to reduce our costs, but speed. That's one of the trends that we're seeing, real-time deliverables in terms of the need to provide information. Citizens are demanding it. We're seeing it in our parliament. What used to be 1 week to turn around committee documents became 48 hours, 24 hours, and in some cases a real push for real time. Televised, closed captioning. Closed captioning is becoming a huge industry for us. We're just beginning to explore how we're using it. Certainly for question period, we're using closed captioning. Many of the committees now are being closed captioned. And the closed captioning, I think, is incredible because we're able to tap into resources that don't necessarily need to sit in Ottawa. People who do closed captioning can work virtually anywhere. And when I started the discussion, I talked about a female workforce and the demographics and young people. The richness of having talent across this wonderful country and internationally will allow us, hopefully, to tap into some of those skill sets in using technology, in using a mechanism and a communications means that Canadians are certainly looking for. So what I think holds for the future for some of you in this room, very quickly, I think you have to be open to change. It's easy, it's really easy to say. It's harder to do. I speak from experience. I think you have to be curious. I'm preoccupied in the workforce to see how we've maybe forced people not to be curious. We worry about productivity. We worry about how many minutes, how many documents, what the quality is, what the next job is, and have we eliminated time to be curious, to experiment, to share information, to say, you know, somebody's doing something really interesting in the European Union. Could we be doing that here? Could we leverage that? I encourage curiosity. You're going to have to be diplomats. We have 4 generations in the workforce, and I think that that has wonderful, unique opportunities and it also has some challenges. And I think that coming into a new workforce, bringing in a different perspective and respecting the history and the values that have come in terms of people who have the 30 years, the 35 years of experience, it is incredible richness. But diplomacy and agility, I think, are going to be key. You have to be business savvy. I don't mean to come across as an employer of a sweatshop organization. That's not who I am and what I believe in, but our clients are asking for quality, real time, and they're pushing us to make sure that we're competitive and that we are giving them the best value for money. And there is a tendency to look for the lowest cost per word, and that is the reality. And what does productivity mean? We talked about this earlier, Ritas and I. It means understanding your supply chain. Where do you use the skills of a talented linguist and language expert? Where do you use the translator? I look at my business process and our workflow, and I don't want translators who are highly skilled, highly specialized to be formatting documents. I'll be quite honest. That's a job an important job that has to be done, and I look at the federal budget. When you have a critical document that has to be formatted, graphs, pie charts, those sorts of things, that is quality that has to be taken care of. It doesn't have to be done by the linguistic or the translating expert. A neurosurgeon doesn't do the final stitching and the anesthesia. Everybody has a role to play, and I think coming into the workforce, being in the private sector, you have to realize what that supply chain is and how we leverage it, and how we leverage technology, and the fact that we are getting new business demands. We are editing machine-translated text. I consider that a huge victory in the public service, where we have convinced people that it's important to be bilingual, to be respectful of the people that we're writing for, and to know the difference in terms of when a document has to be reviewed by a professional. And I think that that is an incredible instinct that we want to have in our society in general. People are curious and they want to use machine translation. We should be encouraging that, but we should also encourage that next instinct, and just as we do with lawyers and accountants. I like to do my own income tax, but I really have the confidence when my accountant takes a fast look and finds me money or finds an error. So I think we need to be mindful of some of that as well. And I think at the end of the day, having the ability to understand our clients. I know that we are in a profession where sometimes it's very difficult to say to a client, well, I can't exactly do what you're looking to do. And I'll give you one really good example. Our client department in Parks Canada is wanting to introduce a very, very different vocabulary, a different approach to dealing with a new generation, sometimes of new Canadians who are coming in, encouraging people to use the park system. They're tweeting, they're on Facebook, and they're using language that is resonating with young people, which doesn't maybe resonate with the type of work that we've traditionally done. And you have to listen to the client and understand what they're looking to do. And you know what? Part of our business, cabinet ministers are making major press announcements and are tweeting in real time afterwards. We're dealing in 146 characters, and we're interpreting tweets almost in real time. And so I think that those are important new areas. We're exploring, we're learning, we're running a little bit with scissors, but I think that this is a profession that is certainly adaptable, and I'm very encouraged by what I see, and I'm hoping that you will continue to be curious and encouraged as well, and I look forward to any of your questions. Thank you for your enthusiasm, and thank you for your interest. Merci.
Mr. Marticonis, the floor is yours.
Okay, let's stop here. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you for inviting me here. I mean, this is a wonderful opportunity to be in the environment which is full of curiosity. I mean, where else if not at the university, where to find things that Anne was saying. I mean, this is pleasure, this is privilege. I'm also on the way to Moncton Conference. That's why I cross Atlantic. Because I think this is important on both sides of Atlantic to be able to compare how do we translate, how do we nourish multilingualism, how do we operate in sometimes two, sometimes many more languages. And that's what I'm going to do now. I mean, first to give you some background things of the multilingualism in the European Union, and then some things about Directorate General of Translation, which I'm heading, and how do we do certain things. I started here. I mean, this is the official languages scheme. Yeah, I mean, it has been developing